How did you cope with being a teenage mum? I mean, you were 16, bringing her up.
I didn't feel like one. I felt like an adult that had absolutely done something really stupid. I was just told so often, what have you done to yourself and what have you done to your child that isn't even born yet?
You were just 15 when Elodie was conceived. When did you become aware that Elodie's father, a much older man, was actually a perpetrator, not a partner?
About 2 years ago. I felt so grown up. I thought it was absolutely consensual. Looking back, it was absolutely statutory rape. I want your viewers to see that there are 10 babies born every day in the UK as a result of rape. We're not talking about them. The law definitely isn't protecting them.
Elodie, are you proud of what your mum's doing in Parliament?
A real-life hero.
Natalie Fleet is a Labour MP who was just 15 when she was groomed and raped. Her daughter, Elodie, grew up knowing she was conceived through rape. They've been speaking together publicly for the first time, and it's a really powerful interview. We'll see it very shortly. But I want to start with the rising level of anti-Semitic hatred on the streets of this country. The government has announced in the last hour that the threat level has been increased from substantial to severe following the terror attack in Golders Green yesterday. The Prime Minister visited the scene of the stabbings earlier and was heckled by protesters. The heckles remain clearly audible as the Prime Minister met first responders to thank them for their actions yesterday in apprehending the suspect and helping the wounded. Well, the Prime Minister then returned to Downing Street, where he was asked about that hostile reception he received.
Can I start by saying I absolutely understand the high levels of anxiety and concern that there are. They're reflected in the various reactions over the last day or two. I completely understand. That anxiety has been there for a very long time. And the appalling terrorist attack yesterday made it worse. In terms of what we've done, we have called an emergency COBRA yesterday to make sure that we're coordinating the response and putting the necessary security in place. I pulled together the various criminal justice agencies this morning to make sure that together we can show that justice will be swift, effective and visible to give confidence to people. We had already put in enhanced funding for security, and we'll put more funding in now. We're looking at what further measures we can take on protests, particularly in relation to chants, to banners, and the repeated nature of protests. We're, of course, looking at what more needs to be done in health and education. And we will fast-track powers to deal with malign state actors. So there is a lot that is being done. Of course, we need to do everything we can, but we do also need to ensure that this is something the whole country is prepared to call out, to see, and to fight against.
Well, Kwasi Kwarteng and Caroline Flint are on the sofa tonight. We're also joined by Sky's chief political correspondent, Jon Craig. Caroline, first, you saw the PM being heckled there. Is it fair to say that there have been a lot of words in recent years about anti-Semitism and not much action, really?
I think it is fair to say that. And I think it's been going on for quite a while, before the last general election, where, in many respects, we haven't really talked significantly as a country about the sort of threats that the Jewish community face. I mean, having security guards outside synagogues and outside schools is not something that's happened in the last 2 years. And I'm not saying this is a Tory thing or whatever, but we haven't paid enough attention to it.
Why do you think that is, Kwasi?
I think that the world has changed much more quickly than the government's ability to respond to it. I remember when we were in government, we always were debating things like the Muslim Brotherhood, organisations like the IRGC. And I think the government now has to take very strong action about those organisations. It also has to not only reassure, words are easy, but they've got to take steps to protect Jewish members of our community.
Jon, just give us a little upsum of, what the Prime Minister has set out today, how much pressure he's under, and where this is likely to go now.
Well, he outlined a number of, when he spoke to the cameras this afternoon, after a meeting with all the Crown Prosecution Service, all the criminal justice agencies. There was, as well as words, there were some promises of action. So, for example, we'll strengthen the visible police presence in our Jewish communities. We'll increase our investment in those Jewish security services. We'll introduce much stronger powers to shut down charities that promote anti-Semitic extremism. We'll prevent hate preachers from entering our country, bar them from our campuses, our streets, our communities, work with the justice system to speed up sentencing on anti-Semitic attacks. And he went on, we need stronger powers to tackle the malign threat posed by states like Iran. There was a little bit, just one more little bit, actually.
Well, let me just, while you're finding that next bit, I mean, that's a long list, isn't it,
Caroline? It's about 10. It's about 10.
OK, finish off. Now
the
you've turned the
last one
page.
was, he talked about Intifada. Where is it? He said, if you stand alongside people who say globalise the Intifada, you're calling for terrorism. People who use that phrase should be prosecuted. So a lot of promises there. Legislation, well, he's going to have to move quickly, isn't he? He's going to have to rush legislation
There's going to have to be something in the King's
after
speech.
the King's speech.
Yeah, so Caroline, there will be action, you think?
I think there has to be, don't they? I mean, they have talked about, I think it's £25 million they're going to give extra for closer policing. But the issue around the language that is used as well is really important too, because I think one of the challenges has been as well is in policing, in them being confident about when they call out anti-Semitism for what it actually is. And
that's the problem with the march.
And that's been the problem about this, because there are, look, we treasure and cherish our right to protest in this country, but there is no doubt about it that there are those who want to take advantage of that to actually normalise anti-Semitism in the protests of those people on those marches for legitimate reasons, but they are being embroiled in this anti-Semitic behaviour.
The elephant in the room is, and I don't want to get too sort of argumentative about this, but the suspicion is that the police take a slightly different approach when Palestinian activists, pro-Palestine people are marching, to when so-called far-right activists, whatever.
Do you think that's true, Caroline?
Look, I think, one of the it's difficult sometimes for the police to do right for wrong in this, but I do think there's something about, we have more training in the police than ever before, we have more law on hate crime than ever before. Question is, what are the real obstacles to the police on the ground being confident about when they call out something that is illegal and when they call out anti-Semitism, when they call out those who are abusing the right to protest to spread fear and actually which ultimately ends up in violent acts against a very small part of our community, but a precious part of our community here in the United Kingdom.
Jon, there's also, as well as all those measures you set out, there is a change to the threat level, isn't there? Tell us about that.
Yeah, this announcement came a short time ago. This is not from the government, although the government did announce it. The decision has been made by something called the Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre. And what they've done is they've raised the threat level from substantial, which means an attack is likely, to severe, meaning an attack is highly likely in the next 6 months. Now, they say it follows yesterday's stabbing, but it is not solely a result of that attack. It says the terrorist threat level has been rising for some time, driven by an increase in broader Islamist and extreme right-wing terrorist threat from individuals and small groups based in the UK. So it's been endorsed by the Home Secretary.
So there's clearly things that we don't know that are bubbling away behind the surface.
What we don't know as well is what the police and others have actually prevented happening too.
That's true.
It has got political today, hasn't it? Zack Polanski, the Green Party leader, retweeting, suggesting that the police used excessive force on the suspect. We have got a statement from the Green Party saying that he's seen the video like everyone else, doesn't know the full picture, knows it was a very difficult situation for the authorities, but we do need to understand more about the response. Jon, we've got a statement also from the Met Police, haven't we?
Well, it's more than a statement. It's a pretty hard-hitting letter from Sir Mark Rowley to Zack Polanski. And I have to say, it's the sort of letter you'd expect a politician to write to a political rival rather than a chief police officer. He talks about how he was disappointed to see his post where he talked about Met officers repeatedly and violently kicking a mentally ill man in the head when he was already incapacitated by taser. And Sir Mark in his letter says, "I'm disappointed because it's this kind of inaccurate and misinformed commentary with its associated casual disregard for the incredibly challenging and dangerous work police officers do to protect the public that's contributing to the rising tensions we're seeing in society and undermines officer confidence to act." Well, the Greens, the Greens have hit back.
I mean, I know Mark Rowley from when I was an MP in Surrey. He was the head of Surrey Police. He's a very measured, calm person. And for him to write that letter suggests that he's not very happy with Zack Polanski. In fact, he seems quite angry.
But it's also, I think, you know, I understand that Mr Polanski also talked about perception.
This was a few days ago, wasn't it?
Yes, a few days ago.
Perception of safety and unsafety
exactly.
within the Jewish
and again,
community.
you know, whether he intended this or not, it plays into diminishing and undermining the threats our Jewish communities are facing. And almost giving people license. Also, the dangerous thing is just giving people a get-out-jail-free card to say, that's OK.
But the thing
because as long as it's about your political intent, because you're concerned about what Israel's doing, you can get away with this. And that's
crazy.
just crazy and
So
wrong.
two things here. I mean, the thing that is really, really distressing is the fact that whatever Israel is doing is basically being the Jewish community here. They've got nothing to do, is being punished, which is completely wrong. And the second thing I would say...
We wouldn't do that to any other community where there's something happening overseas. It wouldn't happen.
And the thing that Mark Rowley, I mean, it just shows how difficult his job is. Because at the one hand, he's going to be attacked by people like Zack Polanski just did, but on the other, he has to defend the Jewish community as well. So it's a very difficult, tightrope that he's walking.
John, there has been a response from the Green Party, hasn't there?
They hit back. They say this. Zack has seen the video like everyone else and doesn't know the full picture and knows it was a very difficult situation for the authorities, but we do need to understand more about the response. So rowing back slightly there, aren't they? I said it's a sort of letter you expect from a politician. What's the Met Chief encouraged, shall we say, by the government to write that letter?
I don't think he was. I mean, reading the letter...
Am I being too cynical?
I know him a bit, Sir Mark a bit.
Never.
It just seemed that he is very angry.
Not everything
He's got a very difficult job. And he hit very hard.
When you interview him, it's quite hard to
he's a very even-tempered guy.
Yeah.
And for him to come out with that letter suggests it's come from him.
Caroline, final thought on, will this play into the local... Maybe John can give a bit of context as well, but will this play into the local elections, do you think, Israel?
Well, I mean, it could do in some parts of the country, in some council wards. I mean, we've seen it in the general election, it having an impact in terms of independent MP stand. And it may, for example, in parts of London, where you may have areas that are strongly Green, but also there is a community there that is strongly pro-Palestine, that divides the Labour vote.
I will be cynical here. I think Zack Polanski's intervention was a dog whistle to voters who feel strongly.
We're going to be discussing this. We're going to be discussing this much more later, and we're also going to be talking to the former Foreign Secretary David Miliband as well. So much more to come on that. Well, now, Natalie Fleet was just 15 when she was groomed and raped. Her daughter, Elodie, grew up knowing she was conceived through rape. But as a teenage mum, Natalie blamed herself for what had happened. Almost a quarter of a century later, Natalie arrived in Parliament with a message to other women.
So to the women in my constituency that I represent, that will be raped today, and will be raped tomorrow, and will be raped every day of this Parliament. I don't know where you are. I can't find you, but you can find me. I will believe you. I will support you.
Well, her daughter, Elodie, has never spoken publicly about what happened before and has been speaking exclusively to the show. And we know that she's not alone. A review for the Centre for Women's Justice estimates that as many as 3,356 children could have been conceived through rape within a single year in England and Wales alone. And those numbers are likely to be an underestimate, with the CWJ noting a disturbing lack of research and data. Disturbing because the consequences for children conceived through rape can be devastating. An earlier review from a decade ago, cited by the CSW, found that nearly 85% of children born through rape were reported by their mothers to display unusual or concerning behaviours, such as stunted development, unexplained physical pain, aggressive behaviour, or persistent feelings of sadness. Well, here is my conversation with the two women now, and a warning, you may find some of the details distressing. Natalie, you were 16 when Elodie was born, 15 when she was conceived. Just describe what went through your mind when you brought her into the world.
Oh, that I haven't even spoken yet. That I had let myself down, that I had let everybody that cared about me down, that I had let so many people down, and I was genuinely grieving the life that I thought I was going to have and the life that I thought I could give her. I was just told so often, what have you done to yourself and what have you done to your child that isn't even born yet? And
just
so...
explain why you were blaming yourself in that way.
It wasn't... I mean, of course, I was blaming myself, I was. But these were real words that people were saying. You know, this isn't... We had an incredible, incredible teenage pregnancy strategy that means when I go to schools now, we aren't... There's just no children having children. I love that. But that teenage pregnancy strategy was all about the girls. I went to one of my local schools the other day and I said, you don't have any teenage mums, do you? And she says, no, my girls are too smart. And I thought, there you are again. You know, it wasn't... It was... teachers, doctors, nurses, midwives, friends, family, what have you done? What have you done to yourself and what have you done to her? But then you asked what it was like bringing her into the world. I just thought, yeah, she's amazing and I'm very lucky to have her. And I'm very proud of everything she is. And I was incredibly determined to give her the best life I possibly could. And that meant a nice home with a dad that I was very lucky to find and has been incredible. She got a brother and she's got 2 other siblings as well. I just wanted to give her everything that I thought she deserved and that I thought she would have had if it had been part of a stable family that was older.
Well, Elodie, when did you first become aware who your father was?
I always knew that the man that I called Dad wasn't my biological dad. That was always made very clear to me. And I can't ever tell you an exact moment that I knew that a sit-down conversation. It was from a very young age. I can just remember that he wasn't my dad and that my dad was different, but my dad didn't want to know anything about me, didn't want to have anything to do with me, and that's just the way that things were.
How did you come to terms with that?
Well, when I was in secondary school, I actually had counselling because I felt not good enough, that the man who is biologically wired to love me unconditionally didn't want to, even want to know my name, didn't want anything to do with me. You know, it was tough. But then, you know, I went through the counselling and did lots of work in trying to come to terms with it and just loving myself regardless of, you know, who my dad is, and I'm incredibly fortunate that I have the dad that I do have because he's absolutely incredible and he's, you know, the best dad that I could have ever asked for.
Natalie, how did you cope with being a teenage mum? I mean, you were 16, bringing her up. You were, a child still.
I didn't feel like one. I felt like an adult that had absolutely done something really stupid and felt that I'd got to prove to the world and to myself that I could give her the best of everything. So people said to me, you're not going to be able to go to university now, your life's over, you had so much potential, I'm so sad for you, I'm so disappointed for you. And I said, I'll still go to university. And they're like, no, you won't, we've seen it too many times before, you won't be able to offer yourself or her the things that we thought you would. And I was just like, no, I'm gonna do all the things and I'm gonna be really proud of her and I'm going to give her the life that she absolutely deserves.
Were you aware of all this going on in the background, the pressure, really?
No. I always knew that Mum thought that she was a bad mum because she would always say, like, if she'd always be like, I'm sorry that I can't do this for you, I'm sorry that I can't do that for you, I'm sorry, I know sometimes you feel like I'm a bad mum, and I would never say that and I would never think that, but I always knew, and that was even till like a few years ago. We're not talking like just as a little child. That was, you know, I always known that mum's had that belief about herself.
Because you were just 15 when you conceived Elodie.
I always wanted to be a mum. I didn't want to be a mum at 15. And the mum that I wanted to be was a really good mum. So to feel like you failed your child before they're born was really tough.
When did you become aware that, you know, Elodie's father, a much older man, was actually a perpetrator, not a partner?
About 2 years ago, when you put your head above the parapet in whatever form, I did it because I thought it was the right thing to do. I thought that politics made such a profound impact on my life. When I needed a government that really did wrap its arms around me, I got one. And I feel like I then have a responsibility to pay that forward. So I really did want to stand and I really did want to do better for my community. But that meant that my family were going to be scrutinised. Every decision I've ever made, every photo that ever gets out into the public domain, everything I've ever done would be scrutinised in a way that I've never had before. So I started thinking about my life, and because I was standing for selection, people started saying things about where my children, where one of my other children came from. This is something that happens as a woman in public life that I wish didn't, but it does. And my first thought is I want to do something that feels really selfish, which is stand for public office so I can help other people. And it is going to have a big impact on my family. And my family have begged me not to do it. And I tell them my need to do it to help my community is bigger than your resistance for me not to. But I do have a responsibility to protect them. So I thought about, you've got to think about anything that could possibly come out. And so I said to Elodie and a younger brother who I'm very proud of, I'm proud of all my children, I said to them, you know, that conception, you know how I always thought that I just had an older boyfriend and that was really cool? I'm actually thinking that this is actually really dodgy, and looking back with fresh eyes and time, I don't think it is what I thought it was. And they were like, you don't say. And I just couldn't believe their reaction. They were so different to me.
So, Elodie, what do you call this relationship all along?
I don't know what I would call it, but it definitely wasn't... I mean, like, he got to... It didn't impact him at all, yet he was 50% of the action that created me as such. And that's very obvious that, like, he had no repercussions for... So when Mum's talking about how she felt about her life was over, nothing happened to him, absolutely nothing.
But how much older was he than you, Natalie?
He was 24.
And you were 15. Mm-hmm. And so how would you describe that? So
I didn't know that until 2 years ago. Well, I think it was 2 years ago, wasn't it, when you sat me down? And it was at that point that I really started to think about it. And like I said before, when I was younger, I felt not good enough because my dad didn't want to stay around. And actually, after my mum sitting me down and explaining his age and what happened and things like that, I was like, I don't want your approval. I don't want anything to do with you. You're a horrible human and you absolutely should have the repercussions that you deserve. But prior to that, I wouldn't say I thought anything because, like, not that it wasn't something we spoke about, but it was just, I had a dad and that was great, so we didn't need to think about that in a way.
But how would you describe now a 24-year-old man having a relationship, getting a 15-year-old girl pregnant? How would you describe that?
A paedophile. He's absolutely a paedophile, like.
And I mean, you laugh at that, Natalie. I mean, how
it just sounds ridiculous. I like your experience and my experience are so different. I love that for you, and I love that you've had a lovely experience. But I felt so grown up. I thought it was absolutely consensual. Looking back, it was absolutely statutory rape. I was under the law says that this is something that shouldn't have been happening. But also, I thought that we were absolutely using contraceptive and we weren't. I was so shocked when I found out I was pregnant.
Because you were so naive, you didn't know how...
I'd done sex education at school. I knew that we were using condoms. That was what people did. That's what we needed to do. They were available. I had them, if not. We'd been given them at school. I absolutely knew that we were fine. I couldn't understand how I could physically be pregnant. I didn't understand. I genuinely did not understand, which, again, looking back now, would mean that if you are led to believe, if you're told that you are using contraception that you're not using, then that again would fall into legislation that would make it rape. And I think that that language didn't exist then. None of that existed then. So when she says things like you're a paedophile, I laugh because I think, don't be ridiculous, it was totally my fault.
You still think that? So you still wouldn't describe him as a perpetrator?
If I have so many women and men, but mainly women, coming to me and they tell me what happened to them, and all I have is empathy and love and hugs, and I believe them. Whenever I'm talking to myself, I always have that voice in my head that's saying, you did this to you, and then you dare to blame others afterwards.
Do you want your mum to report your biological father to the police?
It's really tricky because my gut reaction is yes, of course. He's done something wrong and he should be brought to justice within the law. But I also understand that the system isn't fit for purpose and that actually that would probably cause a lot of years of damage and heartache for our family. And, you know, we haven't had contact with him in a very long time. And what if the things that were being said to Mum before about it's your fault, you're a slut, you're a slag, things like that, like, if all of that, like, we start to get all of that hate again.
It'll
like,
break your heart.
Yeah, and, like, now I've got a daughter and I understand my mum's need to protect me and my siblings because I want to protect her, so it's really tricky.
Would you report to the police, Natalie, now?
We're doing everything that we possibly can to make it so that I can support women. They will be supported every step of the way, believed. We're bringing that court backlog down, putting really difficult measures in to bring it down, and making sure there's space in prisons. We're setting everything up so that I can support other women too. I just feel like I can't. I fundamentally, I still believe it's my fault. And I don't think that I'm on my own with that. I think that, I mean, if we go back to the headlines of the time, we're not talking about, yes, there were children in pubs and there were men keeping an eye out for them, and that was totally normal. And you know, the front pages were all about the scourge on society that we were. And it'd be nice if I got to a position where I didn't think that one day, but we're not there yet.
Elodie, are you proud of what your mum's doing in Parliament?
So incredibly proud. Like I said, I'm a mum, and the fact that when my daughter's old enough to understand, I can sit and tell her this is the changes to the country that your nonna has made. Like, that is just, you know, absolutely incredible to say. A real life hero.
Oh, that's very kind, but the reason I feel like Elodie is a real life hero is she made me a nonna at 40. Like, for every negative emotion and every ounce of shame that I have carried, and for every ounce of shame that I continue to carry, and for as difficult as it is, and I just love you very much, and I'm sorry that I ever let you down. And I get to be a nonna. It's like it's every lottery put together, and I get to win it, and I am going to be a nonna for the rest of my life. I get to keep her and hug her and look after her.
I mean, Elodie, you know, you're so composed, and this is the first time you've ever done a TV interview, but I've noticed that when you get emotional, your lips trembling, is when you hear the self-doubt that your mum still suffers from. Is that right, that that's what makes it hard for you in a way?
Yeah, because Mum's just said, I'm sorry that I've ever let you down, and she's never let me down. So it's really hard to hear the way that she feels about herself when I see her as this absolutely incredible role model who I'm so lucky to have, and my daughter is so lucky to have, but to hear the way that she thinks about herself is really hard to hear.
And I'm sorry for that, but that Cathy is the reason that we're here. It's the reason that I don't want to do these interviews, and I don't want to put my head above the parapet, and I don't want to talk about it. I want there to be people that watch this and see this and think,
That was dodgy, that happened to me too, thank you. Anything from, I think, my belief, is that... Sorry. I believe that the story of women is that everybody's had some kind of experience and it's where on the scale it fits. I think there'll be people watching this, hearing about it, that think, oh my God, that's not her fault. It's deeply ingrained in me that I believe it is. I think people will be watching thinking, that's not your fault. And they tell me that in real life. They come support me in the chamber. I see them in tears as they're trying to get it across to me. And I still struggle to accept it. There'll be people watching this that will be able to feel strongly that it isn't my fault, but will also be carrying that shame.
Well, you've both really done your bit today, more than done your bit. You know, Elodie, the first time you've sat on a sofa in a TV studio like this. Thank you both very much for joining me.
Thank you.
Well, Kwasi and Caroline have been watching that. Caroline, what did you think?
It's really interesting, isn't it, about statutory rape and older men. And in this case, we're talking about a guy in his 20s, early 20s, having sex with someone who's under the age of consent. And it's interesting because it is a breaking the law. But let's be absolutely honest about it. We've had often a culture in our society where within communities, different communities, young men taking advantage of girls of 13, 14, 15 has been part of it. And it's still out there today, I would say.
So what struck me was how differently they approached this terrible tragedy. And for the daughter, it was very clear that her biological father was a paedophile. It was a very clear-cut thing in her mind. That's what she said. But of course, the mother, it's a much more confusing picture. And I think that reflects the fact that over 25 years, thankfully, our society has changed. It's not brilliant now, but it has changed in terms of our attitudes.
And Caroline, you know, hearing them both speaking about this so openly, what did you think about that?
Well, I think that's incredibly brave for anyone to share that from both Natalie and Elodie, because it's tough talking about these things because, you know, no matter how much people might turn around to you, and I think that was reflected in some what Natalie said, that said, you know, you were a victim here. You still sort of feel this 15-year-old in the body of that woman saying, I could have done something, I should have seen this happening. And she was, let's remember, she was a child and she couldn't.
Well, we have much more to discuss with you later on in the programme. Let's go back now to the breaking story tonight, which is that the terrorism threat level has been raised to severe following the stabbings in North London yesterday. The Met's head of counter-terrorism policing, Assistant Commissioner Lawrence Taylor, gave an update at Scotland Yard just a few minutes ago.
As part of our review into the change in the threat level, policing will be reviewing all events across the country. My teams will be working with forces to ensure that we have appropriate protective security measures in place, that the appropriate mitigations are put in place, and we will be engaged with communities who will be affected by large events, as well as those involved in the events, so that we can keep them as safe as they can be.
Well, let's speak now to the former Foreign Secretary and current head of the International Rescue Committee, David Miliband. David, you're the son of Holocaust survivors. I just wonder, from where you're sitting in America, what it looks like, what your response is to this attack, watching from afar.
Good evening, Cathy. I think it's a very, very disturbing day, not just because of what happened today, but because it's part of a long-term trend. I think it's very depressing that it should have come to this. And I think it's really a moment for all of us. Obviously, there's responsibilities on the police to investigate whether the extent to which this is organised. There's some suggestion in the media I saw that this is an organised effort, perhaps foreign engagement as well. There's a big responsibility on authorities all around the country to make sure that Jewish communities are safe and secure. But I think there's also a bigger question for all of us about building a society where everyone feels they belong. And it's such an important part of our country, I think, that every community feels it belongs. We all belong here is absolutely core to everything I've known about Britain. And so I feel it's a moment for all of us, not just those in leadership positions.
I mean, Keir Starmer has been praised for rooting out anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, but he's also got a lot of criticism today. He was heckled in Golders Green today. Do you think there has been too many words, not enough action from the Labour government in the last couple of years?
I'm not going to start pointing fingers. I've seen some of the anger that's been expressed. I've also seen there was commentary, I wrote it down actually, someone said, "I'm not going to give in." I think there's that spirit as well. And I do see it as being that there is the policing element, there is the security and safety element, and then there is the question of the wider responsibility to build this essential zero tolerance of the demonization of communities. And that takes all sorts of new forms because of social media. I think that's very important, but it also takes very practical efforts. And so I think that I think I saw the Prime Minister said that we should recognize the pain that's felt. I've had text messages that speak to that, and I've seen some of the coverage of it. I think that it's vital that we see this for what it is, which is an absolutely cancerous and dangerous trend in our society, one that sadly is reflected in some other countries as well, and one that needs a very, very firm grip.
And would you understand British Jews feeling that they want to leave the country?
That's really a terrifying thing. I mean, I've had conversations over the last few years where that question is raised about where's home and where's safe. I also know that many British Jews will be the first to say that there's nowhere safer, there's nowhere better, there's nowhere that makes them more proud. And obviously I work for an organization that was founded by a refugee, Albert Einstein. He was a refugee from Germany. I know the pain of displacement, whether it be of any community, whatever the community in whatever part of the world. And the idea that people who've found safety and who've made such a contribution to society should then even have to raise the question, that shows you how far things have gone.
I want to ask you about the domestic political situation, which was originally, one of the things we were wanted to talk to you about. And it is clearly a crunch week for Keir Starmer next week with the local elections and national elections too. There is a sort of growing feeling of inevitability about a leadership contest at some point down the track. I was looking at the bookies' odds earlier today. I noticed Angela Rayner and Andy Burnham are the two favourites, each for different reasons. They're sort of unavailable. But your brother, Ed, is third. He's gaining traction. I wondered if you were pleased or worried for him.
Well, I know that you and I are new to politics, Cathy. So we we talk about inevitability used in your comment. I mean, who said a week is a long time in politics? Harold Wilson. I think every Labour Party member is going to be focused on maximising its vote. It's obviously a very tough time to be in government anywhere in the world at the moment, but that makes it all the more important that there are governments with the right values and the right policies to deliver for the people who elect them. I think it's pretty clear that people want more change than feel they've got at the moment. And that speaks to these fundamental questions about what's the cause of the government, what's the signature policies of the government, and what's its ability to explain. But I know the government is full of people of enormous integrity, methodical, serious, good values, and I want them to succeed.
Well, I'll come to the policy literally in just a second, but you neatly dodged that question about your brother. Is he one of those that you've just described?
Come on, Cathy. How long have we been around this course? I'm not going to, you talked about the bookies. I'm not a bookie.
And you're not laying a bet on your brother? We'll leave it at that.
I'm certainly not laying bets or offering odds.
OK, well, look, if Keir Starmer does
manage that's a neat dodge. Maybe that wasn't very neat. Yeah. Maybe it wasn't very neat. It was very blunt.
I'm sure you've spoken to him about it. But look, if Keir Starmer does manage to cling on, you've been quite clear in things you've written that there will be this clamour for change, as you've just said. How should he make that change? Because there's pressure for him to shift to the left. There's pressure for him to get rid of his chancellor, to introduce a wealth tax. What would you say were the consequences of those kinds of actions? What should he do instead?
Well, I'm certainly not going to get into any of that, but one of the things that I wrote in the New Statesman article that I think you're referring to there is that the last thing that one should do is set out to define a policy according to where it sits on the Labour spectrum. The way to set policy is on the basis of the needs of the country. We're facing a divided and dangerous world, and we're facing very, very serious challenges at home. And my big point is that if you take something like Europe, the government has said it wants a reset on Europe, but it's not going to get a reset with a £9 billion worth of trade deals because we're a £3 trillion economy. And one of my big learnings in government and frankly out of government is that it's the dosage that you put behind a policy intent that is absolutely critical to whether or not it has an impact on the country, which is the most important thing, and also whether or not voters notice the benefit of it, which is also a consideration. And so I think it's not a matter of slicing and dicing one part of the Labour spectrum versus another. It's about thinking in this moment of very serious domestic challenge and enormous convulsion internationally, how one can steer and make sure that you get your prioritization and your dosage appropriate for the things that you want to do. That's what I mean by signature policies.
So given the scale of the challenge that you've just set out, when the government talks about resetting its policy towards Europe, are you surprised that there isn't a greater move to make the argument for rejoining the EU? Should the Labour government start to do that?
Well, I think that Europe is changing. So the question of how we engage with Europe in part depends on the way in which the European Union changes. Remember, it has enlargement processes with countries in the Balkans. It also has a massive question about Ukraine and what its relationship with Europe about. What I would say is that Britain's security and prosperity is integrally linked to the rest of Europe. We're not going to be able to be prosperous or secure without strong links to the rest of Europe. At the time of Brexit,
punches, though. I mean, you know, call a spade a spade. Do you think the Labour government should be making the argument, or at least debating that point about whether the UK should rejoin the EU sooner rather than later?
I think the government has faced a radically changed situation. And that's a situation in which its manifesto becomes more of a constraint than an empowerment. And that's a problem. Now, if you think about the issue that you raised to do with our economy, now, we know that the cheapest way to get an economic boost is actually to align with the single market for goods so that our manufacturers can be part of the supply chains where there's currently a risk premium on any business that's trying to work in the UK. That's just a hindrance to our ability to fend for ourselves. And at a time when our growth rate is being shrunk by what's happening internationally, we need every wind in our sails to go forward.
Right, so rejoin the single market, or at least have that debate.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting. The alignment with the single market is worth twice as much as joining the customs union. So quite a lot of these ideas that are thrown around, just aligning for goods as a part of a single market, you don't even have to join the single market, just aligning with them. If you go to the Frontier Economics website, I did, you get twice the benefit of joining the customs union. My point is that there's a macro picture here. On the foreign policy and security front, it's obvious that the major threat to the UK is Russia. That's one reason why the war in Iran is so damaging, because Russia has been empowered by this war. We've got a lot to offer and a lot to gain from closer foreign and security cooperation. And then that provides a rubric or a framework within which these day-to-day economic questions can be addressed in a proper strategic framework.
But you are dodging the question on whether the Labour should make the argument to rejoin the EU. I mean, do you think ultimately you're talking about
rejoin the, look, in the short term, we're not going to rejoin the EU. We've got to get much closer.
Make the argument for the longer term.
We've got to get much closer to the European Union, depending on how the European Union changes. Right. For example, there's one part of the debate in Europe where you'll have 2 or 3 different tiers of European membership. Should we be associated with that? Definitely.
Right. Well, this challenged world that you've been describing very clearly, part of that is clearly the war in Iran. With your humanitarian hat on, when you look at the constraints on the Straits of Hormuz, what impact is that having now, and will that have on the most precarious countries in the world?
Well, the Council on Foreign Relations in New York calls the closure of the Straits of Hormuz a slow-motion famine machine. And the reason for that is that the 30% of the world's fertilizer that goes through the Straits of Hormuz is not being laid on the ground of West Africa at the moment. In fact, it should have been laid earlier this month. And that's going to have an impact in 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks' time. So we're seeing, first of all, very significant challenge on food insecurity. I mean, essentially hunger. The World Food Programme says 45 million people are going to be pushed into crisis levels of hunger. That's an obvious thing. Secondly, I don't want people to think that the ceasefire means that there is normality returning in a country like Lebanon, where 1 in 5 people have been displaced from their homes by the conflict. So there's a humanitarian emergency there. And obviously then there's the wider geopolitics where, as I said earlier, a country like Russia is reinforced in its ability to wage war in Ukraine, which is also a humanitarian problem.
David Miliband, great to hear your thoughts as ever. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Kwasi and Caroline on the sofa watching that interview. Caroline, I mean, he's seen by some as the best Labour leader, you never had. He wasn't keen to get into the leadership issue, but what did you make of what he said about the future direction of the party, especially when it came to Europe?
Well, I mean, he was a very good politician, David Miliband, but he didn't stand against Gordon Brown. And then, obviously, that it was the brothers Miliband together, and therein lies a tale, and there's a lot to unpick in terms of things David could have done to probably win that contest. But, he isn't coming back. We've got to deal with the Labour Party today and the person. I actually think... I think Keir Starmer, and he has admitted some things where he's got it wrong, and I don't think any of the cabinet thought this 2 years first session would end up like it is. But the truth is, actually, there isn't some ready-made person to step in.
Prince over the water.
We've got to learn. I mean, from your experience with Boris
we kept chopping leaders.
Yeah,
and we did have 14 years. Exactly. And there was one time when Boris came in 2019 where I think we'd got 9% in the European elections that were held that year, and we were 17% roughly in the polls. So we did that trick, if you like, once. But then, of course, the whole house of cards came crashing down. So it's not a silver bullet. I was very struck by what he said. He never mentioned Keir Starmer once, which I was really surprised at. He talked about the government. He talked about direction. But, someone like David Miliband, no, he didn't. And I know Miliband a little bit, David. And he's always described himself as a Labour man. He's a very loyal party man. And I was very struck by the fact that he didn't give a full...
Well, that might have opened up the question about Keir Starmer.
...endorsement to the current leader of the party and the current Prime Minister. So that surprised me. And then the other questions that he dodged were about... And I think this was a subtle dig at Keir Starmer when he said, well, you've got to have direction and you've got to be able to explain it. One of the big criticisms from his own benches of the Prime Minister is that he hasn't had a story and he's been very bad at explaining what it is his government is about. Yeah. So I thought that was quite an interesting interview.
Well, I mean, I don't think he was saying there's any too rocket science about the whole thing. He might dress it up in a certain way. But the fact is, there's some basic things across different groups in society, whether on the right or the left, that really are important. Housing, really important.
Yes,
having decent jobs. Good education for children. Actually, that speaks to a wider group of people across the political spectrum. And where governments fail is when they have a smorgasbord of things that doesn't actually speak to those basic values.
But he's interesting on the EU,
and that's what he's saying, is focus on the priorities.
Quite. What he's saying about the single market, though.
Yeah, I mean, his view is a standard... Blair centrist sort of view.
There's quite a few Blairites who want to rejoin the EU.
He was too cautious to say that that's what he wanted.
Well, maybe, but I think the truth is that actually people like David and others actually didn't see what was coming in terms of people's antipathy towards the EU. And if they had, we might have had a different result in that 2016.
Look, I thought it was a great interview. He's very intelligent. I've always rated him on an intellectual level, but he's very removed. I mean, he's in New York. Next week, all sorts of councillors across the country are going to be facing their electorates.
Distance gives him perspective, though.
It does give him perspective, but the actual, door-to-door knocking, the actual reality...
The hard graft.
He seems a little bit distant from that.
OK, well, we're going to be talking about the economy a little bit later in the programme, so just hang on for that, because the Bank of England has held interest rates at 3.75%, but warned that the Middle East energy shock could drive up inflation and interest rates. Came on the same day that oil prices hit their highest level since 2022. I've been chatting to our business and economics correspondent, Paul Kelso. Paul, interest rates held. Should be a good news story, but it's not really, is it?
Yeah, given everything we know about the potential inflationary impact of the Iran war, huge energy shock, holding rates should be good news, but it might not be. This might actually be a case of pain delayed. The Bank of England, essentially what it said today is it's holding rates because it doesn't know what's going to happen next. It doesn't know the path of where this war is going. What it is looking at very closely in its whole presentation today is essentially about this, perhaps the most important number in global economics. It's the oil price. This goes back 6 months. We can see, $70, $80 a barrel bumping along, historically pretty cheap and affordable. Then the war starts, the price takes off. This is really interesting. The last 48 hours, we've seen it spike up above $126. It actually went up while the Bank of England's committee was holding its meeting. And if we just show you on a different timeline, go back 5 years, it's higher, that spike. It's come down a bit since that peak.
And of course, that's Ukraine, isn't it?
Post the Ukraine war, which of course was an energy crisis that drove a massive inflationary spike. So, working off potential oil price movements, what happens to oil and gas prices from here, from these highs? The bank set out 3 scenarios for what happens to those prices and what that means.
They like their scenarios.
They
don't
love
they,
a
the bank
scenario.
movers?
Now,
Yeah.
they've changed. They used to have a central scenario, but they've been advised not to do that, so they've just given us 3.
Is that because they know less?
It might be helpful in this scenario. What it actually does means they set out 3, but inevitably we perhaps focus a little bit on the worst case. So this, just to explain what we're looking at, is the scenarios for where inflation goes from here, depending on where oil prices are. Green is the most benign. Blue is sort of Goldilocks, not too high but a bit higher. Red is the scary one, scenario C. And what you can see, look, the target's 2%. That's what the bank's trying to keep us at. 3.3% is where we are now. Even these benign scenarios, in which oil is quickly back below $110 a barrel, see inflation go up. 3.6,
And the big spike along here, that's again Ukraine. So
Absolutely.
inflation, close to 12%.
Yeah.
I mean, you might look at that and think, well, scenario C, the worst case scenario, the red line, doesn't look so bad, but it is, isn't it?
But when we did it up 6.2%, I mean, this was, we thought, a once-in-a-lifetime shock. Even this is high, right? 3.7. The target's 2%. We're living with this high number, 6.2%. And what's really damaging about this is the bank says there's nothing that they know there's nothing they can do to change energy prices. Changing interest rates here does nothing to change that. But this is all the second-round shocks, as they call them. This is food prices. This is domestic energy bills. This is transport. This is practically everything in the economy being driven up. And look here, look how long that 11% took to get rid of. And that's the danger about scenario C. So the question then from there is, what do they do about rates? And again, 3 scenarios. Let's see if I can, we can show them to us. There they are. Rates go up more depending on how high inflation is. But again, I think the key takeaway here is the blue and green lines, the more benign ones, at least 2 rate increases. That's up to 4.25%. The scariest one, we're up at 5.25%. The peak that we've just been walking down from. Now, we don't know where reality sits in here, where it will wash out, but it does tell us that essentially the UK is prisoner to what happens in the Gulf.
And, Keir Starmer had hoped that interest rates would start coming down, so clearly his hopes dashed. How worried did the governor seem today when you spoke to him?
He was trying his best not to pin himself down to any of these scenarios.
He doesn't like making news, does he?
No, he doesn't. I mean, it's part of his job, right? He moves markets, but his point is, it might not get that bad, but there's a real chance it will. And under all those scenarios, prices are rising, and so are rates.
Very depressing. Thanks for putting us in the picture. Oh, Kwasi and Caroline were glued to that. Kwasi, I mean, former chancellor, it's looking pretty grim, but it's pain deferred, isn't it? So we're not feeling it just yet.
So what the bank will be worried about is this inflation target, this inflation number, and it's very unusual for them to say it could go to 6.2. I mean, that's a very specific number, and that says to me that they're trying to pave the way for interest rate rises.
Which is a disaster for Keir Starmer.
Which will be bad for the government in lots of ways.
I mean, Caroline, it is a disaster.
It's really tough. It's really tough. And to be fair, it's not of their own making. This is being caused by the situation we have with particularly the protagonists of the United States of America and Iran.
But it's always like that. There's always stuff.
Yes, of course. But it has really been a shock. And I think they've done 3 variations of where it could end up. And any government, it's difficult in these circumstances to be able to find a way out of this.
So does it hasten Keir Starmer's demise?
No, I don't think so, because I think both with the conflict but also the cost of living, the public need to know, even if he isn't the most popular Prime Minister, he is focused on the job, and that's why I don't think anything's going to happen. I think he'll still be here at the back end of this year.
The main reason I agree with you is 2 reasons. One, the Labour Party don't have a mechanism to get rid of their leader very effectively. I mean, the Tories do.
Well, they do, but it's a nightmare.
So cumbersome. I mean, I saw that nonsense in the summer of 2016 with Corbyn. Do you remember? I mean, it was
got the scars on it.
And, exactly. They couldn't get rid of him. And the second thing is...
You're very good at getting rid of your leaders,
very good. Almost too good.
Chancellors.
Almost too good. But the issue that they can't address is who's going to replace Sir Keir Starmer. There's no obvious
But coming back to the economy, you tried to boost growth with your crazy tax plan.
Well, it wasn't crazy.
Well,
but
I'm being facetious, but the markets did not like it.
The markets didn't like it, and we know what happened.
That option is out. Taxes at a record high, borrowing high. What do they do?
I think they're going to increase taxes. I think they're going to have to do that.
I mean, they're already at record
2 reasons.
highs.
One, there's no appetite to reduce the welfare bill. And the second issue is that if interest rates rise, the cost of government borrowing will go up. So they'll need to raise more money through tax.
OK, well, let me bring you a little bit of good economic news, which is that there's been a Truth Social post, which is usually bad economic news, but this time it's good because in honour of the... This is Donald Trump talking. He says, in honour of the King and Queen of the United Kingdom, who have just left the White House, soon headed back to their wonderful country, I will be removing the tariffs and restrictions on whisky having to do with Scotland's ability to work with the Commonwealth of Kentucky on whisky and bourbon, two very important industries within Scotland and Kentucky. People have wanted to do this for a long time in that there had been great inter-country trade, especially having to do with the wooden barrels used. I didn't know how long this was when I started, by the way. The King and Queen got me to do something that nobody else was able to do without hardly even asking. A wonderful honour to have them both in the USA. President Donald J. Trump.
But that's how he works. If you're nice to him, he does nice things. If you're nasty to him, he does nasty things.
Yeah. And
this is just a bit childish.
Look, I mean, I think all things considered, it's been a really good visit by the King and the Queen. And if we're in cordial discussion, let's hope it lasts more than a day.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because next week he could flip out and be back to bad Donald.
Kwasi, I can't let you go without teasing you about crypto. And, you know, you're chair of this Bitcoin company.
That's right.
Nigel Farage has invested.
He has invested.
So why aren't you joining Reform already?
No, look, I've said repeatedly, you can do business with someone, you can work with somebody. I'm sure many of your viewers work with people whose political views they don't necessarily share. I mean, in this modern world, we seem to just have to have friendships and business relationships with people who have exactly the same views as us.
It's not that you asked and he wouldn't have you.
I don't want to join Reform. I will never join Reform.
Right, you'll stick with the Tories even
I think you know, it's up to people if they want to defect, they want to choose. I've been a member of the Tory party, I think, for 30 years now. And that's the party I feel most comfortable in.
We know our tribes. Labour,
that's right.
Tory.
Even if you're both doomed.
You flip. It's like you know, people watching their football team, and then their football team loses, so they'll support the other team. I mean, that's the sort of thing that I don't think sits very well.
Right, and Caroline, I mean, the Green Party's never been your thing, has it?
I just also always thought they were sort of a party.
How long have you been a member of the Labour Party?
47 years. Yes, thank you very much for that.
Great to chat to you both as ever. We are out of time, but we will leave you with this image of the King at a block party in Virginia this evening, relaxed and clearly making a new friend as his US trip comes to a close.